Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Park Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
Coming up on To the Contrary, the politics of women's health heats up as the November elections edge closer. Then, homeless in America, outgoing HUD Secretary Fudge on the housing crisis. I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, abortion politics dominate a divided nation. The Supreme Court will hear arguments next week on the future of the abortion pill, mifepristone. Medical abortions now account for up to 63% of all U.S. abortions. Meanwhile, New York Governor Kathy Hochul announced women can now purchase birth control without a prescription from New York state pharmacies. Also, President Biden signed an executive order this week prioritizing women-centered health research. And Donald Trump, former abortion opponent turned supporter, signals approval for a national abortion ban after 15 weeks, with exceptions. Joining us today are D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, former member of the House of Representatives Nan Hayworth, Sam Bennett of the New York Amsterdam News, and Rina Shah, Republican political strategist. So, Eleanor, what is this Supreme Court going to do with the FDA's ability to control drugs? Is it worth opening up everything to state controls just to get rid of medical abortions?
Well, when they struck down protections, when they overturned Roe versus Wade, but the rate has been going up ever since they struck down protections. So you have two Americas where rates are going up and rates are going down.
But what do you think they will do? I mean, it would be a huge move by this court to take away agency control over drugs. They're not doctors. They don't understand the drugs the way the analysts, the people with the MDs and the researchers with MDs at the Food and Drug Administration. So for them to say, you don't have the power to legalize mifepristone would be a pretty huge move. Do you expect it from this court?
These are decisions that hinge on whether or not the Constitution allows or specifically denies such things from the federal level. That's what the Supreme Court does. That's what the Dobbs decision was about. Politically, I did not like the Dobbs decision, but constitutionally understood why it was the decision that was made. In terms of access to medications, it's going to have to be couched in constitutional terms. I mean, there's a lot that can be said about the limitations on the administrative state, but whether or not it's specifically unconstitutional for government agencies to allow or enable the prescription of medications, all of which depends on providers doing so. And indeed, there are limitations, obviously, state by state. It'll be interesting to see what the court does. But whatever they do, it will be based on how they construe the Constitution as governing these things.
Rina, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that's the key phrase here is that it's about the states. What are the states going to do? And that is what I hear from so many conservatives. And I've even heard that from people who are, anti-abortion in my circles, that they actually feel pretty good about abortion being kicked to the states. so many ways feel, Bonnie, that this is frustrating on a huge level for women in my generation who are of childbearing age. I am somebody, and have said it many times on this show, I'm anti-abortion for myself, but I'm pro-choice for other women. I am concerned largely because I do come from Southern West Virginia. I know who is hardest hit when we talk about taking access to reproductive care away. And that is women from, lower socioeconomic status. They are rural women. They are Black and brown women. And so in a sense, I use the word frustrating because here at the ripe old age of 40, I feel that anybody who needs to terminate a pregnancy should be able to do so in a timely manner and get access to compassionate care, to affordable care. I'm the daughter of a physician. I'm the sister of one and the wife of one. You're not going to get anything different from me. And I think it pains me to know that this is back on, not the table, but I do worry about really the future of bodily autonomy for women when it feels like certain states are going to go as far as they possibly can. And that is it's a really frustrating moment in time. Of course, I'm watching the Supreme Court. Of course, I care about what they do. But wherever things land up in state houses or at the federal level, one thing is for sure, my generation just never thought this day was possible.
Well, I think, thank you for your remarks, Rina. Very appreciated. Coming from the New York Amsterdam News that now has the largest digital readership of any legacy Black newspaper in the country, Bonnie, these anti-choice legislations and decisions overwhelmingly disproportionately impact women of color. And so we at the Amsterdam News are very firmly for a women's right to choose out of respect for what our readers need. But I think the more troubling issue is what this is doing to us globally as a country. We were already bad on women's rights. We're now ranked 100th in the world among women in elected office. We're behind Afghanistan now. We've plummeted to 43 in the global rankings of women's rights. When we look at half of our population being crippled by not being able to make their own important life decisions, I think there's very, very dangerous impact. And I'm fascinated to see what happens in this state-by-state landscape we're in. Will states like California that have been so proactive in reaching out to other women in other states to say, hey, if you can't get an abortion in your state, come to us. And we've seen that sparked rise, particularly in border states that are near. So if California is next to another state that outlaws abortion, the women are going to California to get their abortions. What is the long-term economic effect? Am I a woman? Am I going to say, well, the heck with this, I'm going to move to California? I think there's a lot of unaccounted for blowback, including this election. I love the bumper stickers I'm seeing everywhere that go, row, row, row your vote. Women are getting catalyzed in a way that I think has been long overdue.
Haven't seen that one, but have seen the polls that show that's definitely, the justices aren't supposed to, as I recall from law school, get involved in political questions. They're supposed to stay away from areas where they don't have the technical expertise. And yet it seems like this particular court, anyway, whether there's the five-member majority to do this or not, but for them to overturn half a century of precedent, which of course they did with the Dobbs decision,
That's right.
And tell the FDA, you don't have control over drugs and who has access to which drugs. We do, and we're taking that control away from you, is a pretty major step, is it not, Eleanor?
It's a huge step, and I think the court is going to have to decide that.
And are we at the point where there has been enough evidence to show that American voters, particularly Democrats, 1 in 5 Democrats now says, and we haven't seen numbers like this since before Roe was handed down by the Supreme Court in the 70s. 1 in 5 Democrats says abortion is his or her top issue. Are Republicans going to feel the whiplash from the Dobbs decision, Nan, in November?
I think they very well could. Yeah. I would respectfully disagree with you, Bonnie, on the court's role, if you will. The court's role is to determine whether or not the Constitution, the amended Constitution, but the Constitution permits certain types of authority to the federal government, to its agencies. They're not assuming expertise. They are judging on whether or not purview over certain decisions is constitutionally appropriate. That's a very different thing. But you are absolutely right that it has very profound political implications on the ground. And I am a Republican who believes that the Dobbs decision, again, was constitutionally appropriate, but that Republicans should fall on the side of respecting women's autonomy over the decisions made regarding their own bodies. And I think where Republicans can square the circle is in terms of how taxpayers are asked to provide for things that they may find morally repugnant. And I think that's where the argument could go appropriately. There's no reason that Republicans on the ground cannot be passionate advocates for the pro-life position and provide their time and their treasure to supporting pregnant women, to supporting women and children. But I agree politically, it could have profound implications, and I think it definitely had a major effect in the 2022 election.
And I want each of you to respond to what you think about Donald Trump saying this week, quoting sending up the cliched trial balloon to see how his constituents would respond to him approving a 15-week ban on abortions as opposed to a total ban, which some states have done. And as we have seen in the special elections and in local elections since Dobbs, have really hurt Republican parties in some very red states. Your thoughts, Rina?
Yeah, I mean, every time you see abortion on the ballot, since obviously Roe was overturned, you see Republicans lose, right? And so Ohio is one such place that has taught us a lesson. And I think this week somewhere in the Midwest, and forgive me for getting it wrong, some Republicans recognize that and try to get it off the ballot. I believe it's Montana, but I also believe I'm wrong on that. So fact check me there. But here's the thing about Donald Trump. Of course, he's going to test the waters because Nikki Haley continues to loom large in this race. And he saw her masterfully.
She's not pro-choice.
She's not pro-choice, no. But if you saw her debate performances last fall, in at least 3 of them, if not 4, she knocked it out of the ballpark in discussing abortion. She even had the heads turning of some women who consider themselves center-left. That, my goodness, this is somebody that might have a different position, but they had faith that she wouldn't go to the White House and do a total ban or something of that sort. She talked about humanizing women instead of demonizing them. It was, okay, sure, it was talking points, but it was the best we've heard from a Republican in the aftermath of the overturn of Roe. So Trump was never going to be for a total ban. Let's just get that straight. I don't think he'd ever would have gone for that. He knows what he's doing in that sense. But a 15-week, he thinks it's palatable. And for the vast majority of Americans who are Republican, they can kind of get with the 15-week. But again, we don't need to split hairs here. This is just Donald Trump trying to figure out how he can also gain ground and sound reasonable on abortion.
But you're a Republican woman. Is any Republican woman who was opposed to Donald Trump because of his anti-abortion stance going to believe him that he is now all of a sudden changing position? I mean, it used to be the politicians took one position and stuck with it. That may be completely changed in this environment. But it used to be that you would vote for somebody believing they would follow the agenda that they tell you while they're campaigning they would follow. So will Republican middle-of-the-road women who are pro-choice, or at least partially pro-choice, going to believe him now that he's saying maybe he'll support a 15-week ban?
Well, that type of woman you're describing has some huge trust issues with Donald Trump anyway. And so that's kind of over there. But in looking at that segment of women also, and not to paint with a broad brush, these women are putting economy and immigration / public safety ahead of abortion. Because in a sense, what they've determined is that it's been kicked back to the states. States are doing what they will on it. And so this is the voter, though, that's outside the Republican Party, again, independently minded, in a swing state, college educated, suburban woman that will help determine the election, of course.
Okay, what about evangelicals? I mean, the president got to where he is. They're the base of his support. What are they going to do if he now says, okay, I'm for a 15-week ban? Most abortions are performed before 15 weeks or almost 4 months of pregnancy.
Well, I think they're still going to hold their nose and vote for him. But obviously, I would imagine he's running the risk of alienating them. But,
are they going to be motivated to vote, which is a huge...
when I was a political organizer on the ground, we always joked, Republicans roll out of bed on election day and show up at the polls. Democrats, you have to, kick and scream and drag them out of bed to get them there. So I think we can count on them to perform. I would count on them to hold their nose on this one. What is fascinating to me is that at this stage of the election, with the Democrats amassing a much bigger war chest at this point than Trump's got, the Democrats have a lot to flagellate him with on abortion right now, with the continued war chests that are being developed, not only on the national level, but by independent, individual candidates that are running. I think the Republican Party is setting itself up to be very vulnerable for Democratic attack on all fronts on abortion. I think they're very vulnerable right now.
All right. From the political impact of women's health to help for the homeless. Tents and other temporary housing are popping up in cities nationwide, spotlighting homelessness. Some 650,000 people in the U.S. are homeless. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and longtime U.S. House member Marcia Fudge has been working to find solutions to this enormous problem. With mixed emotions, Fudge has resigned and leaves office this week for family reasons. We recently spoke to her about the crisis.
The greatest nation in the world should not have people sleeping on its streets. Not only is there a crisis of homelessness or unhoused people, there is a crisis of having low income and moderate affordable homes. But think about young people coming out of school or young couples who can't afford their rent or have to stay with their parents. People now with young families, which is one of the fastest growing groups of people on the street, they do not want their children sleeping on the streets. Women my age, Bonnie, are now another fast-growing group of people who are sleeping on the streets.
Secretary Fudge told me HUD has been instrumental in the building of more than 500,000 low and moderate income housing units, but that's 3 million units short.
We need to build in more density, which is also a problem in many communities because of their zoning. We have landlords who don't want to take vouchers. And so we have that source of income discrimination. In order to turn this crisis around, we all have to work together to make it happen. That means developers, it means mayors and communities.
Fudge fears the U.S. is becoming a nation that is inured to the pain of poor people.
You drive by an encampment long enough, Bonnie, you stop seeing it. You don't see the people in it. All you see is a tent. So until we can make it personal, we're not going to solve it.
So, Nan, not to mix this with another issue, but it occurred to me that I wonder if this incredible growth of homelessness has anything to do with increased immigrants, and particularly immigrants who come across, say, the borders of Texas. There are 60,000 in New York City whom they are about to say, we can't house you anymore for more than 30 days. Is that contributing to the problem of homelessness nationwide or not?
Sure, it almost undoubtedly is. And indeed, Bonnie, we know of instances, at least, in which some veterans, for example, who are dear to people's hearts, and that tends to become a highly publicized event, but some veterans have been deprived of the housing that they were being provided with public funds because the housing was needed for migrants. And an incontinent southern border helps no one. It does exacerbate our difficulties. So the entire emphasis directionally should be on how do we use the power of consumers? How do we let American citizens in need be better consumers, be empowered consumers in markets that offer more choices?
All right, but it's pretty difficult to make. I mean, rents right now are high.
Yeah.
Home prices are high.
Rent control actually has a lot to do with limiting housing stock in markets.
As a developer, if these two things are true, and they certainly are in this economy, how can you possibly build housing for low-income people and not go broke doing it?
Well, it's indeed a challenge, but I look at the state of New York, and the state of New York has taken many steps in recent years to make it harder to, and mind you, developers get lots of breaks, so I'm not saying they don't, and I don't think that we should play favorites on either side of this, but because of the way in which rents have been limited, the way in which returns on these investments have been limited, that severely restricts the amount of investment that people want to make in this marketplace. Doesn't have to be that way. So there is a middle ground to be reached. I agree with Secretary Fudge on that. And it does take imaginative thinking on, looking back and saying, wait a minute, how can we enhance the markets in this? How can we empower consumers? And that means letting them keep more dollars in their pockets, too.
Eleanor, you worked in the U.S. House for many years with Marcia Fudge. What do you think of her tenure as housing secretary? Did she ease the huge gap between the number of units needed and the number of units available? And is there anything she should have done that she didn't?
Well, she had a remarkable tenure because she presided during the pandemic,
Right.
when housing costs have been on the rise, but she's put the president in a difficult position because it's going to be hard to appoint a new secretary right now when the November vote is upon us.
So that may have to wait until after the elections, or
It certainly may, and I think it's going to become one of the primary issues after
right.
that.
And your thoughts, Rina?
Yeah, I'm just so frustrated because for years we've been talking about the housing bubble and how it's going to pop at any moment. And so in a sense, I look at the data and it's just so stark. Of course, we know that the post-pandemic era has its challenges, which are unique, that are related to what the cost of housing is. But also, I think this issue of women living on the streets, and about 38% of our homeless population here in the U.S. is comprised of women and girls. Yeah. That leaves the door open to so much. I mean, sex trafficking, girls trying to just find a safe place to sleep at night. And so they enter into trafficking situations. It almost feels like one bad move and that's it. You're on the street. Right. And we don't have familial bonds the way we used to. People aren't doing intergenerational living, and so therefore, you don't see people have an opportunity to land up with their children in a relative's home and be safe for the night. They're ending up in shelters, and then what's that mean for them? Is there a bridge to even having an affordable place to rent? I just fear that this is so out of the dialogue, the societal dialogue, daily life, that we don't talk enough about how this problem can be solved.
What research shows that the most effective way to end homelessness is to provide housing. And it ends up being the least expensive solution. A lot of European nations have made great progress here, but that requires these government-private partnerships to make that possible. The other thing that's very important.
What about tiny houses or
exactly
little apartments out of storage bins, as I've seen done all over the internet?
All you need is 200 square feet. You don't need much, and there's very creative ways to do it. And I think the other thing that's critically important is, well, what causes homelessness? a lot of it is the incredible cost. Our healthcare in this nation is, we spend far more than other nations do per citizen with lower health positive outcomes. It's the biggest reason that forces homelessness is medical costs.
Really?
We really need to cut the administrative costs of medicine in particular.
Yeah,
and
but
it is we have the worst of both worlds in the United States. We have heavy government involvement, and we also have big market players who are reaping enormous profits, and the benefits aren't being seen by the public.
Exactly. And I just want to put a shout out to my dear, dear, dear friend, Marcia Fudge, who was so proud when she was named Secretary of Housing. She accomplished a lot. And to Eleanor's comment, Congresswoman Norton, she took it over at arguably one of the worst times one could in the middle of the pandemic and managed to get things done. That's a huge accomplishment.
All right. And thank you all for contributing to this accomplishment. That's it for this edition. Please keep the conversation going on our social media platforms. Reach out to us at To the Contrary and visit our website, the address on the screen. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next time.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Park Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
You're watching PBS.